Squad registration rules in Football Manager can be an absolute nightmare. For example, in the MLS you have to stick to a salary cap, and currently with Venezia on my stream save over on Twitch, I'm having a very difficult time only being able to register one non-EU player per season, which means I can't bring in all the Brazilian wonder kids that I want. In today's experiment though, I've created the most frustrating set of squad registration rules that I could think of. Every single player in the English Football League has to be a homegrown player. That means there's 623 players in the Premier League, including the likes of Kevin De Bruyne and Mohamed Salah, who cannot play in the Premier League anymore because they're not homegrown. Now for clubs in League 2 and League 1, this shouldn't really be much of an issue. Most players there are English players anyway, but as you get into the Championship and especially the Premier League, that's where it's going to get really tricky. I'm going to simulate 50 years in this experiment to find out where English football goes, and if I'm being honest, I think it's going to go backwards. Whilst England is one of the best countries in the world for producing footballers, I don't think they're going to produce enough elite players to keep the Premier League at the very top of the footballing pyramid. I also think we're going to see a bit of a change in the Premier League as well, as some of the clubs lower down the divisions with really good youth academies are going to do fantastically well, so I think maybe Crewe might end up in the Premier League. I've also got really high hopes for clubs like Middlesbrough and for Blackburn, who I think could do really well with their great facilities, junior coaching and youth recruitment. But that's just what I think. Let me know what you guys think down in the comment section, and whilst you're down there, make sure you are subscribed to the channel and drop a like on the video, because this is actually the first video that I'm recording as a full-time content creator. As I record this, yesterday was my last day in the job, so this is the first video as a full-timer. So 50 years into the future, and the first thing that I've seen on this social feed is that Everton have just won the Champions League, which is interesting. Also just seen that Crewe promoted to EFL League 1, which does suggest that they haven't done particularly well. I thought they might get to the Premier League because historically they have pretty decent youth intakes in real life, but clearly not in this version of the game. So let's start off by going through the English leagues then, starting with the Premier League, and as you can see, Everton have won the title here, only drawing 2 games, winning 36 and losing 0. Okay, Everton are literally the world's greatest team right now. They have won so many Premier Leagues as well. That's ridiculous. But I did predict right at the start of the video that the English Premier League was going to fall backwards, and it has done. It's gone from number 1 in the most reputable leagues in Europe to number 4. I must say actually, there aren't too many unfamiliar faces in the Premier League. Barnsley are in there in 17th place. Obviously they're not routinely in the Premier League. Sheffield Wednesday up there as well, but they're not too unlikely to be in the Premier League. Neither are Blackburn or Burnley. So Barnsley seems to be the only sort of strange addition. So sorry Barnsley fans, but I'm slating you there. What is interesting though, that Man City and Man United are not very good. They're 14th and 16th, and if we have a look at them and their history, you can see that they've never really finished inside the top 10 much. Every now and again they might breach the top 10, but they actually got relegated, Man City, a few years ago, finishing 18th in the Premier League, bounced straight back, got relegated again, bounced straight back in this past season, have saved themselves. But despite the relegations, they have actually won a Champions League at some point in 2054. So that wasn't that long ago. That's on this list here. 2053-54, they finished 9th. The season before, they finished 11th, which means they couldn't have qualified from the Champions League via the league. So they must have won the Europa League. They've won 7 of them, and the last one was in 2053. But in 2052, they finished 8th, which is outside of those European places. Does that mean they won the FA Cup the season before to get in there? The answer to that is no, they didn't. They won it around, but not in 2052. So did they win the Europa Conference? They won the Europa Conference League in 2052, which means they must have won the Carabao Cup in 2051. It's on there. That's ridiculous. So despite not finishing in any European places, Man City won the Carabao Cup to get Conference League football, won the Conference League to get Europa League football, won the Europa League to get Champions League football, and then won the Champions League. And they did all of that whilst being a mediocre Premier League side. Right, looking down into the Championship, the first thing that I see is Lincoln City getting relegated. You hate to see it, but I do quite enjoy Lincoln City being up in the Championship. Have they been a yo-yo team up and down the leagues? A little bit. They've been in the Championship a little bit, but they flirted with League 2 and the Championship, mostly a League 1 side. Interestingly, the youth facilities are 16 out of 20, and they're not that at the start of the game. They're like 12 maybe, so it is interesting that they've put some real emphasis on the youth facilities. They're really taking the homegrown status seriously. Actually, if we just flick through some teams in this division, a lot of clubs have got really high youth facilities, like 15 or above. There's a few clubs like Southend who have just not bothered, essentially, but they're doing quite well within the Championship. So they're obviously buying players in to do quite well. But it does look like a lot of clubs have really invested heavily into youth facilities to get them up to scratch. Now, there are some Premier League clubs who have really struggled. Leicester City have dropped down to League One, and they lost in the playoffs. That's not great for them. Same as Crystal Palace, they're in 5th place there too. So some Premier League clubs have had a really difficult time. Leicester have dropped all the way from the Premier League and recently into League One, so they've not been there that long, but are more of a Championship team in recent years. What about Crystal Palace, though? We can click on them, look at their history. Similar sort of story, in the Championship quite a long time, have dropped to League One, and recently League Two only just got promoted back from League Two. And with Palace's youth facilities of 14 and the youth recruitment and junior coaching being pretty low, and I assume Leicester, no, not too bad, a little bit better, but nothing amazing. I guess they've really fallen foul of being able to generate good players. There are some non-league clubs though that are starting to permeate through the Football League. You can see here Bromley, York City and Maidstone United, they've all got themselves up into the Football League quite comfortably and seem to be holding their own. So they obviously are doing quite well for themselves. Looking into League Two, well, Nottingham Forest have not had a great time. They've dropped all the way down to League Two, but have just won at the title there. Have they always been a League Two club? If we look at their history, they've been up and down all over the place. They've been a National League club at some point. So Forest, wow, they've really struggled. But Bournemouth, another former Premier League club, are right down there in 7th place as well. But again, we're seeing a lot of non-league clubs coming up and actually holding on and doing quite well with the registration rules in place. Now, I didn't put the registration rules in place for the National League or any other non-league leagues, essentially, mostly on the grounds that at this level, you're basically playing with homegrown players anyway. Most players playing at this level are going to be English. So going back to the Premier League, let's have a look at the previous winners, and it's actually really interesting. There are some really defined eras here. So if we go right back to the start, Man United became literally the best team in the Premier League for a good decade or so. And this is probably because they actually have a lot of homegrown players at the club already. Think of players like Rashford, for example, he's homegrown, but also players like Pogba. I guess they would have held on to him in this database to keep hold of him. And they've also got a lot of other good young players that they've brought through. So United have done very well for themselves, but Brighton had a really good run of being like the second best team in the Premier League. But out of nowhere, one of the teams that I really tipped for this was Blackburn, and they had a bit of decade of dominance as well, winning every single title for a good few years. Then it was the turn of Arsenal, had a bit of a blip in the late 2040s as Brighton and Fulham and Liverpool got a few titles in there. Fulham picked up another one in 2056, but then it's been a domination from Merseyside. Liverpool picked up 2 titles, but Everton have won everything for the past decade. So actually that's really interesting. There have been some really solid eras of good development, and what we can probably see from this is Everton had a golden generation, and they just obviously got a golden generation coming in around this time, and they stayed at the club forever. We can probably say the same things for Blackburn and for Arsenal as well. Golden generations come through, and if we look at Everton's team, for example, and look at the senior squad and sort it by just my squad view and have a look at the age of a lot of these players, you can see a lot of them are 27 and above, and I'm going to assume most of these players have played at Everton their whole career. They have done. What about this guy? Virtually his whole career since moving from Cluj at a very early age. He would have got the homegrown status being playing at Everton for long enough. This guy, for example, similar sort of thing. So yeah, it just suggests that golden generations come about, and that's why they keep winning titles. Okay, so we saw right at the start of the video that Everton won a Champions League. Let's check out the previous winners of the Champions League, but I don't think we're going to see too many English teams in here on the grounds that we've seen England drop to 4th in competition reputation rankings. And by looks of things, Everton are literally the only team that I can see here from England that have made a final, and they've only just won it in 2070-71, 50 years in the future. There must be some English teams here somewhere. If we scroll all the way down, you can see Man United had a bit of a period of domination in the late 2020s. Liverpool picked up one in 2034. But other than that, it's been a barren spell for English clubs winning a Champions League. Arsenal got to a final in 48-49. But that's it. That's really it. Also, Man City as well. forgot about them. But before you scream in the comment section, yeah, Man City won 1-2. So again, like we sort of said at the start of the video, yes, these English clubs are going to be very good, but they're not going to produce enough elite players consistently to be able to dominate the Champions League, where teams like Real Madrid, Inter, Juventus, Barca, Bayern Munich can buy anyone they want in the world to create a worldwide team of superstars. But I'm going to assume that this must have a really big impact on the English national team. If all the young English talents are being forced to play football, a lot of them are going to be reaching their potential ability. So let's have a look at the English national team, where they are currently first in world rankings. Okay, so this is maybe having quite the positive impact on the English national team, particularly these 4 World Cups that I can see being won. So they won these 4 World Cups in 2022, 54 and 62. So okay, it's actually took quite a long time for this to become an effective thing for England. Or they're saying that they can runners-up twice in the mid-30s. They obviously won it twice in 54 and 62, runners-up in 2070. But yeah, the hypothesis that all of these young players coming through, playing for their clubs constantly, reaching their potential ability, has had a profound impact on England, until you realise that Belgium have won 4 without any of these squad registration rules in place. Maybe that's the counterpoint to the argument that I'm making, that if English clubs had to play homegrown players in every single game, we'd win more World Cups. But Belgium have just kind of said, no, that's not the case. But what is really interesting is that only 12 of the England national team right now play in England. You've got 6 playing in La Liga, you've got 2 playing in Ukraine, 1 in Germany and 1 in Italy as well. So clearly, and 1 in France too. So clearly, a lot of these quality players are being bought out by the best clubs in the world, who can afford to bring in the best players to be at the top. English clubs are lacking a little bit, aren't they? So this experiment has been really interesting. It's really opened my eyes to what the English Football League could look like, with every player having to be a homegrown player playing in the system. I think in the future, what we might do is open it up to other leagues to see more of a European or worldwide look at how things would be if every player had to be homegrown.